Glasgow is a vibrant and wonderful city. It has always been known for its eclectic mix of characters. Throughout the years, the city has dealt with its own fair share of strange mysteries and paranormal occurrences. From the Gorbals vampire of the inner city streets in 1955, to the spectral hauntings and paranormal investigations of the Homewood House Villa in recent years. But in the mid-1970s, on the south side of Glasgow, a warped and menacing creature appeared as though out of a nightmare and began to terrorise the people of the city, the Gurning Man of Glasgow. In 1976, reports of a bizarre, horrifying figure stalking the streets of Glasgow's Cross Hill district began to flood in. The sightings were all from frightened young women, claiming to have seen a tall, thin, pale man following them late at night as they returned home. His movements were described as crippled or disjointed, yet he bore the uncanny ability to vanish within an instant. Encounters and tales of the Gurning Man would spread throughout Glasgow. One of the most well-known early sightings of the man came from two teenaged girls. It was getting late into the night when the two young women were walking home from a party. Despite the late hour, the women stated that the streets were quite well lit, as that night there had been a large bright moon. As they were walking, they noticed a strange lone man not too far ahead of them. He was described as a tall, thin man in his early 50s. His head was completely bald and shining in the moonlight. He appeared to be wearing a tight black leotard and rocking back and forth nervously. As the girls got closer to where the man was standing, a feeling of apprehension began to rise within them. The pair stopped chatting and quickened their pace in the hope that they could pass the man with all haste. One of the teenagers risked a brief glance at the man as they passed. She was confronted with a crazed, nightmarish face. Warped and distorted into a hideous expression, the man glared at her. He then began to grunt and snort loudly as his seemingly broken body stuttered towards the pair. The girls began to run, screaming and calling for help. When they had reached the end of the street, they looked behind them to see their would-be pursuer. But the street was empty. The man was gone. The girls later stated that there was no possible way the man could have moved out of their sight in such a short amount of time. It had been mere seconds, and the street offered no cover or place to hide. When asked to describe the man's sinister face, one of the girls said it was somewhere between an insane smile and a pained grimace. Similar tales were told by other young women at the time. The man's warped face and his sudden disappearance were crucial details which appeared in every report. The majority of these encounters occurred on the streets either at night or very early in the morning. Another incident involving the Gurning Man occurred when a woman went to put out her empty milk bottles for collection. As she was placing the bottles on the doorstep, from the corner of her eye, she noticed a strange thin man standing in the middle of the street and shuffling from side to side in an outlandish nature. Understandably concerned with the man, she turned and called on her husband, but by the time she had moved her attention back to the street, the man was gone. In one particularly chilling report, a middle-aged woman was woken in the night by a strange grunting and snorting noise. At first, the woman assumed it was her husband snoring again, but as the sounds became louder and more erratic, she began to panic. When the woman opened her eyes and dared to glance at the bottom of her bed, she came face to face with the Gurning Man. He stood at the foot of the bed and was leaning over the woman with a horrifying smile. The arms and hands of the man were writhing as if he was in agonising pain. The woman was paralysed with fear and dared not move or make a sound. Suddenly the Gurning Man let out an anguished scream, which woke the woman's husband with a start. He leapt out of bed and turned on the light, but there was nothing to be seen. His wife, still shaken, told him about the horrifying man. The husband searched every room in the house and couldn't find a trace of the Gurning man, or of a break-in. In the 3-year period, from 1976 to 1979, there were 17 reports of the Gurning man from Glasgow's Cross Hill area. 11 of these sightings happened in the city streets at night, but the remaining 6 occurred within the homes of the people of Cross Hill. On multiple occasions, the witnesses called the police, thinking there had been a break-in, but when the officers searched the house and the surrounding area, there was no evidence of forced entry. These encounters with the Gurning man were so traumatizing that in the aftermath, some of the women would move to new areas in the hope that he would not follow. After that period, in the late 70s, the Gurning man completely disappeared. There were no reports or sightings, and the stories faded into obscurity. At least that was the case, until the hideous face of the Gurning man returned in 2017. As a young woman returned from a friend's house late one evening, on her way to Queen's Park near Cross Hill, she stumbled upon a strange figure standing between a car and a parked van. The spindly old man, as she described him, was wearing very tight-fitting dark clothes and rocked back and forth in a demented fashion. As she approached the man, he began to grunt and snort loudly. She ran and never looked back. She later reported that the man was between 70 and 90 years old. Not long after this sighting, there was another, this time in the Queen's Park itself. Late one evening, a group of teenage girls were drinking in the park when they began to hear a strange noise. One of the girls thought she had spotted something or someone beneath a large tree near where they were sitting. She pointed this out to one of her friends, and one of them shone the light from a mobile phone towards the area. It was there, standing in front of them, the grotesque expression of the Gurning man. The girls, filled with horror and panic, launched into a full sprint away from the man. One turned to see if the nightmarish creature was following them, but he had vanished completely. Once again, the incident was reported to the police, yet nothing was found. So who or what is Glasgow's Gurning man? Hundreds of possible theories have been suggested over the years, everything from aliens to demons. But is there any truth within these suppositions? Let's start with the name. In Scotland, the term Gurning is used to refer to someone who is complaining or crying. There doesn't seem to be much of a link between the Scots use of the word and the Gurning man. It's likely the man got his name from the English usage of the word, where to gurn is to distort your facial expression. In fact, in rural parts of England, there are still gurning competitions, in which competitors would try to distort their face to the most bizarre levels. It does, however, seem a little strange that reference to this would appear in a Scottish city. There are two leading explanations for the Gurning man. The first is that he was just a regular man. Some have suggested that alcohol or drugs may explain his erratic and irrational behaviour. It's important to remember that the Gurning man never actually physically attacked anyone, so this may not have been his motive, even if his actions came across as violent or antagonistic. This version of the Gurning man fits perfectly with the milk bottle sighting. In the early hours of a Glasgow morning, it's not that uncommon to stumble upon an inebriated man trying to return home. The sightings in 2017 also aid this, as on both occasions the man's age was thought to be between 70 and 90. These sightings occurred around 38 years after he was first sighted in the 1970s, when the man was described as being in his late 40s to early 50s. The timeline here does seem to connect quite well, and certainly lends some credence to the non-paranormal explanation. More difficult to explain are the sightings of the Gurning man that occurred indoors. The man disappearing and leaving no evidence would seem to be an impossible feat for a human, but there is one explanation. From the woman's report, The sighting seems to have much in common with sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis is a condition that can occur when a person is waking from a deep sleep. Their mind wakes and becomes aware of its surroundings, but the body is still unable to move. This tends to last for 1 to 5 minutes, but it can be accompanied by strong visual or auditory hallucinations. I have left some research papers in the description below about sleep paralysis, if you would like to learn more. Knowing of the hallucinogenic tendencies of sleep paralysis, it's plausible that the woman who made the report suffered from one of these episodes during the same time when the horrifying tales of the Gurning man were common knowledge. These combined to create her own private nightmare encounter with the man. This concept of the human Gurning man and sleep paralysis does seem to account for some of the reports, but becomes increasingly unlikely when you look at the consistency and number of the reports, not to mention his uncanny ability to vanish into thin air. The second explanation is that the Gurning man is some form of apparition or ghost. The soul of a tormented man who once lived in the area. This would explain many of the sightings. It's the reason that there is never any evidence of a break-in, and how he is rarely seen during the daylight hours. Could this be the reason that the Gurning man could vanish so quickly? Could there have been some initial trigger to the sightings in the 70s? A building destroyed perhaps, that had a strong connection to the Phantom Man? What if this same ground was changed again in 2017 and disturbed the rest of the Gurning man? Once again, the Gurning man caused no physical harm, but he did seem to be surrounded by fear and terror. This reminded me of Native American skinwalkers, who are said to feed on the fear and anxiety they create within their prey. Is it possible that the Gurning man also receives some energy from the horror inflicted upon those unlikely enough to meet him? The main issue I have with both of these narratives, and the story of the Gurning man as a whole, is while I was researching the tales and the reports, I could not find the names of the people who claim to have seen him. In fact, I could find nothing but the same 4 or 5 stories that I have included here. If such a horrific creature really did haunt the woman of Cross Hill in the late 70s, you would think that it would have been mentioned in the news at the time. But I have not been able to find any mention of the Gurning man, or the many supposed incidents in the local press. Also, there seems to be no police records of any of the incidents occurring, or any form of police investigation. If you know of any substantial evidence, I would love to hear about it. But until then, it would seem that the tales of Glasgow's Gurning man were either some form of urban legend or fictional folklore. Of course, it is also possible that all of the information connected to these cases were purposely removed. Thank you for listening.